All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep, deep into the dark triad.
Yeah, we're talking narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy.
And we're really going to go past just those labels, you know?
Right.
We've got some sources here that dig into like the real tactics and the motivations, and I think some of it's going to be pretty surprising.
Yeah, one of the things that's really fascinating is how these traits that we consider so negative can actually be beneficial in certain situations.
Yeah, that's what I find so interesting, right? It's like not about good or bad, but how these things play out in real life.
Exactly. So,
Hmm.
want to start with narcissism.
Yeah, let's dissect it.
Okay,
So we all kind of have this picture in our minds, right? The selfie-obsessed attention craving.
sure.
But our sources say there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, it goes way beyond just vanity. It's really a deep-seated belief that you're superior to other people and that you need constant admiration.
Okay, so this need for admiration, it can get pretty manipulative,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
There's this thing called love bombing. I read about this in one of the sources and it just blew my mind.
Oh, yeah. Love bombing is like a classic narcissist tactic.
Yeah.
Basically, what they do is they shower a person with a ton of attention and affection, usually really early in a relationship. And they use that to make the other person feel like they're in this super intense special bond.
So it's not genuine, it's all about control.
Exactly. And the thing is, narcissists often, they don't even see it as manipulation, you know,
Hmm.
because they really believe that they're
They
special.
think they deserve it.
They deserve it. Exactly. And they don't feel bad about it at all because they lack empathy.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to Machiavellianism. This is like strategy, manipulation, cunning. Right.
Yep, think of it as like the art of getting what you want no matter what, even if you have to deceive people or step on them to get there.
So you're not above lying or cheating or
Oh, no.
to get where you need to go.
Exactly.
It sounds like Machiavellians are really good at this impression management thing.
Oh, yeah. They are masters at crafting this image of themselves that makes them seem really trustworthy and charming, but they're really hiding their true intentions.
So they're good at playing the game, basically.
Oh, they're experts at it. They know how to work a room, how to sabotage their rivals, how to suck up to the right people, all very strategically.
Wow, so they're not necessarily like in-your-face aggressive.
Not necessarily.
It's more subtle.
It's much more subtle. They understand how to influence people, and they're really good at it.
This is kind of freaking me out. I'm like thinking about who I know.
Right.
Okay, so last but not least, let's talk about psychopathy.
Right.
This one's often connected to like a coldness, an emotional detachment.
Yeah, a real lack of empathy, a real inability to form genuine bonds with people.
So the sources say that psychopaths really struggle with feeling empathy and forming genuine connections.
Right, and that means that they often act impulsively without thinking about the consequences because they just don't get how it affects other people.
And it can lead to some dangerous behaviors, right?
Oh, absolutely. They might do really risky things or even break the law without a second thought. And the scary part is they can be really charming, really manipulative, so they can hide it really well.
So we're not just talking about criminals. It could be anybody, right?
It could be, yeah. In fact, some of the sources talk about how psychopaths are actually drawn to jobs where they have a lot of control but don't have to deal with a lot of emotion,
Like what?
like surgeons, high-powered executives, stuff like that.
That's unsettling, isn't it?
Yeah,
It makes you wonder about people's motivation. Okay, but here's the thing. All of these traits that we've been talking about, they're not always separate, are they?
no, not at all. They overlap a lot, and when they do, it can be really, really intense.
Yeah, so we got to look at how they work together and how that makes it even more complex, right?
Exactly, and that's what we're going to dig into next.
Okay, so we've looked at each of these dark triad traits on their own,
Right.
but now I think we got to see how they actually play out, like, in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely, because, understanding the dark triad, it's not just some theoretical thing, right?
Right.
It really affects how we interact with each other, especially our personal relationships.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, I think we've all encountered this to some degree, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like a friend or a family member or even a partner
Yeah.
who maybe has like a little bit of this dark side.
Yeah, the research really shows that people who are high in these dark triad traits, they tend to leave a lot of hurt in their wake,
Mhm.
especially in their close relationships.
Yeah, so not just your typical relationship drama. We're talking about like a pattern of
Yeah.
toxic behavior.
Exactly. Like, imagine you're in a relationship and your partner constantly needs to be the center of attention,
Oh, yeah.
always demanding praise and validation.
Oh, yeah.
And then they put you down, they belittle your accomplishments, that kind of thing.
That just screams narcissism, right?
Totally. And it can be really damaging to the other person in the relationship, They start to feel insecure. They question their own worth,
Yeah,
maybe even their sanity.
that's rough. What about Machiavellianism? How does that play out in relationships?
Well, a Machiavellian partner, they're going to be really good at emotional manipulation. They might use guilt trips or play the victim to get their way.
It's like they're always pulling the strings.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not afraid to pit people against each other or spread rumors or just withhold affection as a way to punish you.
That's messed up.
It is. And then if you add psychopathy into the mix,
Ooh, that's a scary thought.
yeah, it can get really dangerous.
Yeah.
A psychopathic partner, they might completely disregard your feelings.
Yeah.
They might engage in all sorts of reckless behavior that puts you at risk.
The sources mentioned this. It was a pretty disturbing pattern where some psychopaths actually seem to enjoy causing their partner pain.
Yeah, that's one of the really dark sides of this trait.
Yeah.
And it really underscores how important it is to recognize the red flags and get help if you're in a relationship with someone like this.
Yeah. It's just heartbreaking to think about how much damage this can do to people.
It is. And it's not just romantic relationships.
Yeah.
The dark triad can really poison families, friendships, professional networks, all of it.
Yeah, I imagine it's especially bad in families where a parent has these traits.
Oh, yeah, like a narcissistic parent who constantly pits their kids against each other for their attention.
Yeah.
Or a Machiavellian parent who just manipulates everyone for their own amusement.
So it creates all this chaos and distrust.
Exactly. And that can leave some really deep scars.
That's heavy stuff. So it's important to understand these traits, but what can we actually do about it?
That's the big question, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about labeling people.
Right.
It's about figuring out if there's any hope for change.
So it's not hopeless?
Not at all. Remember, the whole point of studying the dark triad isn't to judge people.
Right.
It's to understand them
Yeah.
and to see how their personality interacts with their environment.
So it's not like someone is just born bad.
No, genes might play a role, but environment is huge.
What kind of things are we talking about?
Oh, think about early childhood experiences, trauma, cultural influences, even the kind of media you're exposed to.
Yeah.
All that stuff can shape your personality.
So it's a mix of nature and nurture.
Exactly. And that means that there's potential for intervention. There's potential for change.
You mentioned genes before. Are there specific genes that are linked to these traits?
Well, that's something that scientists are still researching.
Okay.
But it seems like there are some genes related to things like impulsivity and empathy
Okay.
that might play a role.
But there's no dark triad gene.
No, it's way more complicated than that. It's probably a bunch of different genes interacting with the environment.
So someone who shows these traits, it's not like they're stuck that way forever?
Nope, not necessarily. Therapy can help. Self-awareness, positive social interactions.
What kind of therapy works best for these kinds of things?
Well, there's this therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT,
Okay.
and it's been shown to be pretty effective.
How does that work?
Basically, it helps people to identify their negative thought patterns
Okay.
and then challenge those patterns and learn healthier ways of coping.
So you're basically rewiring their thinking.
Yeah, kind of, but it's important to be realistic. Change can be really hard.
Yeah, especially with something as deep-seated as personality.
Exactly. And some people might not even see their behavior as a problem.
That's tough.
It is, the lack of empathy and self-awareness that we talked about.
Yeah.
It can make it really difficult for people to see the harm that they're causing.
So what can we do if we're dealing with someone who seems to have these dark traits?
Well, the most important thing is to set boundaries.
Okay.
You have to protect yourself emotionally and mentally.
Right.
And sometimes that means distancing yourself from that person.
I mean, that's easier said than done, though, right?
Yes.
Especially if it's someone you care about.
It is tough. But you can't change someone who doesn't want to change.
Yeah.
And sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to walk away.
Okay, so that's the personal level. But what about the bigger picture? How does the dark triad affect society as a whole?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Well, think about all the systems that we have in place, right? Politics, finance, the media.
Okay, I'm seeing a connection here. Are you saying that these traits can actually thrive in certain environments?
It's definitely something to think about.
Yep.
Imagine a political system that rewards charisma and ruthlessness.
Okay, yeah.
People with narcissistic and Machiavellian tendencies would do really well in that kind of system.
It's not hard to picture, right? A narcissistic politician who just craves the spotlight
Right.
and manipulates everyone to get what they want.
Exactly. And then if you throw in a little psychopathy,
Ooh. Ooh,
They might not even care about ethics or the well-being of the people they're supposed to be serving.
that's a recipe for disaster.
It is, and it's not just politics,
Right.
right? The financial world is another place where these traits can be really dangerous.
Yeah, it's all about competition and profit.
Exactly. So someone with Machiavellian tendencies
Mm-hmm.
might be drawn to that kind of environment
Yeah.
where they can manipulate and deceive people to make a lot of money.
And they might not even feel bad about it because they lack empathy.
Exactly. And then there's the media.
Yeah, yeah.
In today's world where there's so much information and everyone's trying to get attention,
Yeah.
someone with narcissistic tendencies might be drawn to that world.
I can see that, like a narcissistic news anchor who just loves the drama and the attention.
Right. And they might not even care about the truth.
Oh, so it's not just a personal problem, it's a societal problem.
Exactly. When these traits are left unchecked, they can really damage our institutions
Yeah.
and our sense of well-being as a society.
It's a lot to think about. So where do we go from here? Is there any way to reduce the influence of the dark triad on society?
That's a great question, and that's what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've gone deep into the dark triad.
Yeah.
We've seen how it messes with relationships, how it can even affect society as a whole.
Right.
But is there anything we can do about it? Is there any hope of actually making things better?
Oh, I definitely think there's hope, but it's not going to be easy,
Yeah.
We're talking about something that's super complex, so it's not about, completely getting rid of these traits.
Right.
That's probably not realistic.
Yeah.
It's more about understanding them and figuring out how we can minimize the damage they do.
Okay, so where do we even start? I mean, it feels like we've opened this Pandora's box and now all this darkness is out there.
Right. Well, I think the most important thing is awareness.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about recognizing these traits in other people,
Yeah.
but we also need to be aware of the systems, the environments that allow these traits to thrive.
So it's not just about spotting the narcissist in the room, it's about understanding how the room itself might be making them worse.
Exactly. Think about, the corporate world. If you have a company culture that's all about cutthroat competition, where people are rewarded for being ruthless and ambitious,
Yeah.
well, guess what? That's going to attract people with dark triad traits.
It's like you're setting up a system that rewards bad behavior.
Yeah. So part of the solution is to change those systems, right?
Okay.
If we encourage collaboration and ethical behavior, and if we reward empathy,
Yeah.
then it becomes a lot less appealing for people who are just trying to manipulate and exploit others.
So it's about changing the incentives.
Right, and this applies to other areas too, like politics, for example.
Oh, right.
We got to be careful about these charismatic leaders who just prey on people's fears and anxieties.
Yeah.
We need to support leaders who are honest and compassionate and who actually care about the common good.
Especially these days.
Yeah, and the media plays a big role too. We can't just blindly accept everything we see and hear.
Right.
We got to be critical. We got to be able to spot those manipulative tactics that are used to try and influence us.
And support media that actually cares about the truth.
Exactly.
So it's about being conscious of the systems, being careful about who we support, and being critical of the information we consume.
Right, but it's also about individual action. We talked about setting boundaries in relationships.
Yeah.
But we can also challenge these behaviors when we see them in our everyday lives.
So if you have that coworker who's always trying to manipulate everyone,
Yeah.
you don't just let them get away with it, you call them out.
It can be tough, but it's important.
Yeah.
Sometimes just pointing out those behaviors can make them think twice.
Okay, but what about the people who are really lacking in empathy? Like the psychopaths, can they actually change?
That's a really tough question. And honestly, there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
Some people with psychopathic traits might be resistant to change, but others might be open to therapy,
Oh.
self-reflection, and even small changes can make a big difference.
So it's not about expecting a miracle overnight. It's about encouraging them to take small steps in the right direction.
Exactly. And even if we can't force someone to change, we can make it harder for them to manipulate and exploit others.
By creating those systems and environments that we were talking about.
Exactly.
So it's all connected. It's about individual awareness. It's about systemic change.
Yeah.
And it's about building a culture that values empathy and ethical behavior.
Absolutely.
It's a long process, but it's important, right? I mean, the stakes are pretty high here.
They are, because when the dark triad is left unchecked,
Yeah.
it can really damage our relationships, our institutions,
Yeah.
our society as a whole.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, this deep dive into the dark side of personality. A little scary at times,
Right.
but I feel like I learned a lot.
Me too.
And I think ultimately it's a hopeful message.
I think so too, because knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
The more we understand about the dark triad, the better equipped we are to deal with it.
To protect ourselves, to protect others, and to build a better world.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for guiding us through all of this. It's been really enlightening.
Well, it's been my pleasure.
And to all of you listening out there, keep those manipulative tendencies in check.
Yeah.
Just kidding, mostly.
Right.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the human psyche.